Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the marvellous Sarita Robinson. Sarita is also known as Dr. Survival with a research interest in life-threatening emergencies. And today we're going to be talking about surviving the PhD process. We talk about judging yourself, we talk about trauma bonding, and we also question the notion of resilience. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Sarita.
Hi there, Emma.
Thank you so much for being here and for giving up your time. I know you are super, super busy. I came across your work on survival and I was like, this is just fascinating. And asked if you would come and talk a bit more about that and how that relates to a PhD journey. And you said yes. So thank you very much for that. And I cannot wait to find out more about what you're talking about there. But we always begin with people talking about their own journey into and through the PhD. So could you tell us a little bit about your story, please?
Absolutely. So going back, over 20 years now, I just had a baby, finished my master's, was looking forward to a career as a sixth form tutor. Amazing. And that was my plan for life, and that was what I was going to do. I was very happy with that setup. And then one day I was driving along in Kendal on some twisty, windy roads, and a car came round a blind bend on the wrong side of the road. I had my toddler in the front seat, in the car seat, because you could do that back then. And I hammered on the brakes. The lady who was on the wrong side of the road hammered on her brakes, and we stopped with our number plates touching.
What?
Yeah. And it was one of those moments where you think my life could have ended that day. Yeah. And so I went home, and rather than sort of having what could have been quite a nervous wobble, I basically sat down and reflected on the fact that you only get one life. Amazing. And actually, what was it I deep down wanted to do? And I had loads of insecurities because I was dyslexic and I'd struggled, through the education system. It's not really set up for neurodiverse people particularly.
Right.
So, it was like, but if I could do anything, what would it be? And it was like, well, I want to be a doctor. I want to do a PhD. I want to take my education as far as I can go, because I enjoyed doing my master's. I enjoyed doing my undergraduate. And I really, really enjoy survival psychology. And that survival incident, I think, was really made me reflect about why was it I was able to, hammer on the brakes in time? Why was it that I was able to make the correct decisions? And if I hadn't, if my brain had let me down in that moment, me and my son wouldn't be here now. So putting that into sort of the processing that went through, well, what would I like to do? Yes. And I sat down and I wrote a 5-year plan. And I thought, in 5 years, what I would really like to be called is Dr. Robinson, and I'd really like to be an expert in survival psychology. And I thought, I don't know whether I can do this. I don't know how I even start doing this. I don't even know how to apply for a PhD. And I just wrote to one of my old lecturers and just went, "Dear Dr. Leach, please can I do a PhD with you?"
Amazing.
and bless him, he wrote back. And that was the start of it.
Because you're awesome, Dr. Robinson. Love it when a plan comes together. Amazing. What an amazing story. And it's so true, isn't it? It's seizing the moment and seeing that PhD as an opportunity for you to fulfill your dreams. I love it. Love it. And so you undertook your PhD.
Yes, that's right. Part-time over 5 years with 2 children under 4.
Amazing. And any thoughts to offer on that experience before we go into survival?
Yeah, 20 years ago, there was a real lack of support for people who are pregnant and going through the academic process. I think it has slightly improved now, but it is still a major barrier. So I think that's my top reflection. I was taken on one side by my second supervisor when I got pregnant with my second child, and he just went, "Oh, I've never known anybody actually complete a PhD with 2 children. Maybe you should just take an MPhil now." And it's
what?
Absolutely. So to anybody out there who gets rubbish advice like that, absolutely ignore it. Yes. I did make him come to my graduation, but I did find a different second supervisor.
Good. And 2 brilliant things for that. So first of all, ignore people who are giving you rubbish advice. That's very important. And secondly, also you can choose. You don't have to stick with a supervisor who you don't feel is a kind of good match. And because I think a lot of people do struggle on in the belief that they don't have the opportunity to change, but you do. And that person,
it's absolutely in your control to request that.
So even more amazing then, with 2 little people to complete that PhD over 5 years. Amazing. And so now you are continuing to work in the field. So tell us a little bit about what you're exploring, and then we'll think about how it might apply to the PhD journey.
Yeah, so I'm interested in human survival in acutely life-threatening situations. I'm interested in what people do to prepare. So I'm a big prepper, interested in that preparatory stage. I'm also interested in, from a psychobiological point of view, so what happens in the physiology and how that impacts on the brain and our behaviour in the acute impact stage. So that's when, I don't know, how would we say it, the SH1T hits the fan, so we've got the disaster as it happens. What does your brain do? What does your body do? Why do some people survive? Why do some people succumb? And then I'm interested in that longer term sort of readaptation, bits of post-traumatic stress disorder, but also post-traumatic growth.
Right. And that, obviously you're dealing with quite extreme situations, so you're dealing with military as well as civilian, but there's kind of life-threatening incidents. And of course the PhD isn't life-threatening. Well, although having said that, we know that there are some people who are in such a deep place, and that actually PTSD can be part of that experience in terms of triggers that are coming up for people during the process. So it can be quite a serious place to be, but there is a sense of surviving and needing to think about what you're doing and how to get through that. So just any thoughts then on what you know about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's loads of, everybody says, survive. There's a famous quote goes, surviving a crisis is easy. It's the day-to-day living that wears you down. And there is a bit of that. I think sometimes when you commit to a PhD, it's a huge undertaking. It's a judgment on yourself. So you have that that evaluative pressure that people are judging your work, yes, and whether you're able to attain those, correct levels of, academic rigor, etc. Someone's making that judgment on you, and that can be quite stressful. Also, if you don't have the right resources, you don't have the right support, then that can make it very different. Just like a survival situation, if you don't have the right survival equipment, you ain't going to make it out of there. It makes it so much harder to deal with the situation. So I suppose my first bit of advice that I would sort of draw out of the survival world is around prepping. And making sure that before you go into things or before you make big commitments, you look at your resources and make sure that you've got everything in place. And then, as you go into the PhD and it's underway, we know that networking is so important, that social support, having people that you can talk to, people that you can confide in, people that can pull you up when you're feeling down. And, to be fair, you can return that favour as well. In survival situations, we talk about traumatic bonding. and that people in this traumatic environment will come together and sort of cling to each other and form very strong friendships. You can definitely have that in the PhD world.
Yes.
Some of the closest friendships I made were while I was doing my PhD, and it was literally just somebody to phone up, 10 at night saying, oh my goodness, I've just analysed the data and I think I've done it all wrong, and or oh my goodness, I've looked at the results and they don't make any sense. So those sorts of support networks are so important. The other thing that we take from the survival world is around being optimistic. And I think an optimistic mindset is really, really important. Now, I'm unbelievably optimistic all the time about most things.
Love that.
But you can get into a state with a PhD where you sort of enter learnt helplessness,
right,
and you don't make any progress because you think it's, nothing I do is going to make this right. I can't get the help I need. I can't get through ethics. I can't do whatever the barrier is. It's like you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I think you just need to try and see through that, because one of the problems is if you take on that pessimistic mindset, then you're more likely to not do the proactive things that can help you. And we see this in disaster situations. Some people just go, there's no point doing the training. If I'm in a helicopter crash, I'm just going to die. So I'm not going to engage with the survival training. I'm not going to bother buying the survival equipment. I'm not going to bother, learning the protocols. And they give up even before they've started.
Wow, that's deep, isn't it? I'm not going to go to the training because blimey.
I've done work with people going through underwater helicopter evacuation training, and it's one of the things that's frequently, they frequently say, you always have 2 or 3 on any course. You go, oh, well, it's not much point doing this, is it? If a helicopter crashes, I'm just dead. And it's like,
wow.
Well, no, actually, the statistics show you've got a 50-50 chance. And with the training, you can increase that.
Wow.
Yeah,
there's something. Sorry.
I was going to say it's just about keeping optimistic, and the more that you believe that you can accomplish something, the more you'll keep on going at it.
Absolutely. One of my shamanic teachers talks about the way in which your attitude walks before you. And I love that image of it kind of clearing the path ahead of you. And that exactly like you're saying, in terms of if you're optimistic, that's going to walk ahead of you. And if it's pessimistic, it's going to walk ahead of you, bring things in. And that's not saying be Pollyanna about it, is it? But the training, people.
Yeah, so I mean, it's about helping, taking the opportunities that are available, going on the training courses, asking people. Don't assume that they're too busy to help you or that they can't possibly understand your situation. Give it a try. Ask, go on the training, see if it's helpful. It might not be, but at least you've had a go.
And I think there's something, because often that can be countercultural, isn't it? We know that in academia there is a culture of scarcity. There's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough, and kind of I'm too busy. It's not. So actually kind of going, it's okay, let's make time for this, let's do that. You might have to be actually pushing in a kind of countercultural way. But as you say, actually that's opening up possibilities for you. Might take a little bit extra effort, but it could be really worth it.
Absolutely. When I was doing my PhD, I was having real problems with getting someone to help me with cortisol assays. And, I didn't really come from a very strong biological background. I just needed somebody who was going to help me to learn the techniques that I would need to analyse the saliva samples. And I remember thinking, oh, it's no good. I can't find anybody who's going to help me. No, everyone's going to be so busy. It's just a disaster. Why did I ever put this in my proposal? And then I just sort of picked myself up by my socks and marched myself over to the biology building. And I literally went and knocked on everybody's door. Physically went and knocked and said, hey, you don't know me from Adam. I'm a PhD student over in psychology. Do you know anything about cortisol assays?
Amazing.
And I had a few knockbacks, and then people kept mentioning one person's name. And then I knocked on their door, and they were very happy to let me borrow their PhD student for a couple of days to sort of bring myself up to speed.
Gorgeous. And I think this is the thing, we need to remember that there are wonderful, generous spirited people who are genuinely happy to help. And, you know, they do exist. And so if you reach out, you might be surprised at who you find out there. I love that
Absolutely.
story.
And the more you reach out, the more likely you are to hit the jackpot.
Exactly. You definitely won't find them if you don't ask, will you?
That's absolutely correct.
Awesome. And I also loved what you were saying in terms of this idea of traumatic bonding. I'm still really with that when you were talking about that, and people kind of coming together in this very particular situation, because it is a very particular situation, the PhD. And people might be saying, oh, but I don't know where to find them, you know, again, in that kind of in a more perhaps helpless kind of way of how do I find people. And we often talk,
we've got loads of opportunities now, haven't we, with online networks as well. So things like the Women's Academic Network, or there's other different groups specifically for PhD students, or a lot of universities have, you know, PhD cafes where you can just go hang out. So, I mean, that's like a virtual meet, not an actual cafe. That would be too nice.
That would be super nice. And I think also sometimes, because people maybe feel a bit awkward making initial contact, but going to events, and then being able to even online events, and then finding other people who are interested, and just like a little message of, you know, I really liked what you said, or whatever it is, just to make that contact, because other people, other PhD students are as hungry to make contact as you are, and just remembering that we're all human, and we all want that bonding experience, don't we? Blimey, I used to be in a comedy double act called Bonding Experience, but let's not go back to that.
And it's really interesting. You know, I made one of my closest friends while I was doing my PhD. He had a little kid as well. You know, we had that in common. And that's a friendship we've had for over 20 years now, just based on, you know, reaching out to other people in the department who'd started PhDs that year.
Yeah. And also, social media, as we've said, now social media is brilliant in terms of even just following someone and being, you know, commenting on their thing, you know, just making contact that way can be a great way. So there are ways of doing that, and you don't have to feel alone. That's really important. So I'm gonna then ask you unkindly, because you've already given us lots of great tips, for just a top tip or some top tips to take away.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that comes out of the survival world is this idea of resilient, and we all have to be resilient, and there's loads of things that we can do to be resilient. And sometimes the environment that you're in is so toxic that resilience isn't actually on you. And I think that's important to remember. We can sometimes think maybe about the poison of resilience, and that the idea that if you aren't being resilient, then it's you're failing. And that's not the case at all. Sometimes the environment is just so toxic that nobody would thrive. And if that's the case, sometimes the most resilient thing to do for your mental health is to take a step back and, you know, consider whether, you know, bigger changes are needed to make it a safe environment to be in. And that's definitely something that I consider probably on a 6-monthly basis.
Right.
Am I still happy? Am I still happy with what I'm doing? You know, life is too short to be bogged down in something that you're not enjoying.
That is golden. Sometimes the most resilient thing to do is to take a step back. I love that. Remaining in control and knowing that this is something that you can make changes in. Sarita, you are awesome. Thank you so much again, as I say, for taking the time to be with us. Thank you also for your fantastic work that you are doing. You have a great website, and we'll put the links in the show notes so that people can find out more about what you do, because I'm sure they will be interested to know now they've got a taste of it. And also, don't forget, people, that you can sign up for the notes for the Life Raft. that will give you a bit more information every week, comes into your inbox, and tells you a little bit more about the subject that we're talking about each week. Thank you so much, Sarita.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you everyone for listening.